Here we are with another one. That, and I am testing out a new point and shoot camera with HD movie capability, so if I screw this up a little bit, please excuse it. What we have here is the model 1891 Mosin Nagant. It is a Sestroryetsk. Probably mangled that pronunciation, but who cares? Sestroryetsk Arsenal 1916. This particular rifle has a long history. Not only was it Russian state property, but during the terrible year of 1916 or 17, it ended up as Bulgarian property. And eventually, it probably ended up in Romania. And from Romania, it came here. As you can see, it's still fairly original. Has a few mixed parts in there, but nothing extraordinary. Let's take a closer look at it. Typical oil finish on the stock the Romanians put on there, with some patchy bits of shellac mixed in with it, I think. It's hard to tell. It's typical of these rifles. Most of them do not have cleaning rods. It seems that at some point the Romanians removed them and did not reissue them. You can tell that it had been issued in the field without a cleaning rod because the cleaning rod channel, that's hidden in this part of the stock here, was full of dirt, indicating it had been a very long time since the cleaning rod had ever been in there. Okay, let's take a look at the markings there. If I can get this camera to focus. Close enough, I guess. 1916. Now you can see here, as is very common with a lot of these Balkan issued rifles, they have removed the Imperial Eagle right there. They've peened it out. The original Sestroryetsk markings are still on it. You can see they did the same thing here with the eagle on the receiver. They removed the Tsarist Russia markings on there. Otherwise left it alone. We have an Izhevsk bolt on there, or at least cocking piece. There's a lot of little interesting markings on these older bolts you sometimes see on these M91s. You can see them there. Let's get some light on the subject. All these little inspection stamps. I guess somebody needed to be employed, so they employed someone to stamp a little letter on there through each step of the process of building the rifle and inspecting each individual piece. Now, this rifle has one thing I often tell people with these Balkan rifles to look for, and that is a Bulgarian property stamp called a Pinecone Stamp. And as you can see right here, see him? Right there. See how close I can get? Oh, perfect. You can see it now. If not, I'm going to point to it. Right here. Two little Pinecone stamps. Very easily missed unless you're actually looking for them. Many people might even dismiss that as being a tool mark or just a boo-boo of some kind. But no, that is a Bulgarian Pinecone stamp. Now, sometimes you will find them in here too. This rifle does not have it in the finger groove, but occasionally you will find them in the finger groove. Let's see if anybody notices anything about that finger groove. And that. How nicely centered that stock bolt is. A characteristic often found on US-made M91s. Such as this stock originated on at some point. Typical, that's how the Balkan rifles were. They went through a lot, and they were refurbished many times, and the refurbishments weren't like the Soviet style where the whole rifle was redone. They simply swapped around parts until they got something to work. Bluing is still very nice on this one. And we have a fairly tight crown on it, too. You can see, it shows wear, but plenty of life left in there. No major sins inside the barrel. Whoever had it was taking care of it. And we have the Type 1 barrel bands on here, the older style, which would be correct for 1916. And 1916 was a particularly vicious year. The Russians suffered a series of disasters on the front against Germany and Bulgaria and Austria, and they lost literally millions of these rifles as their troops surrendered or were massacred. And these rifles were pressed back into use by the victorious parties, either at that time or later on. This particular one is not one of the ones they sold to Finland. There's no W stamp there indicating Austria, so we just simply have Bulgarian heritage on this one. It's very smooth. The bolt action on these things is nicely worn in. And I believe this is a mismatched bolt, isn't it? Yes, it is. Serial numbers are mismatched on this one. You see the stock is crack-free. No major repairs on it either, which is rather surprising. But that's a look at a Balkan M91. You don't see them that often anymore. About 15, 20 years ago, these rifles were coming into the country, and you could literally buy one for about $35, $40, just like this. Nowadays, you're going to spend $350, maybe even $400 on one. That's just the way it goes. You know, when things become older, they become more collectible. When they're no longer imported, you don't get as much of an opportunity to get them cheap anymore. And I've fired it. It does fire very well. I don't generally shoot the M91s that much. The sights are not the easiest things on my eyes, but I do fire them when I get them, and I have fired this one, and no surprises. I believe it was around 5 to 6 MOA at about 100 yards, which is typical of these older rifles. I'm sure it would tighten up with younger, better eyes than mine, but such is life. A good look at it. Slight mismatch on the handguard there, and it does have a handguard. Some of these rifles came in without the handguards, and that happens. You can expect to spend both years and a lot of money looking for a handguard for an M91. They're not always easy to come by. And when you do find one, you can expect to spend upwards of $50 to $60 for one in many cases these days. So I was always careful to acquire these intact, except for the cleaning rods, which, as I mentioned, typically are not found on these rifles. Not the Balkan ones. You will find them on the Finnish ones and U.S.-made ones that never left the U.S. But Balkan M91s, they tend to be cleaning rod free, unless somebody along the line has found one and stuck one in there, which is easy enough to do. They are around. And we have the original bayonet with it too, which for some reason is missing the lock screw. I don't really know why. I must have taken it out and forgot to put it back in, or maybe this bayonet never had one. I don't really remember. It's been a lot of years since I picked that up at a flea market somewhere, so I don't really remember anymore. And there you go. The Sestroryetsk M91 1916. Ghost of the Great War rifle there.